Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm back with the long-awaited follow-up to my Windows XP gaming computer, or at least a follow-up to the first video, which is basically just me talking about the machine real quick, some of the headaches I've had with this, getting it to run right, and just some gameplay. Now I do want to clarify the games I've picked are basically just run-of-the-mill generic games. I really wasn't trying to push this machine too much or anything. I just wanted to get some gameplay footage to show kind of where it's at right now. So I just picked, the same games that everybody uses for Windows XP, it seems. Crysis, Oblivion, Fear, and Fallout 3. So yeah, if you see those games being played, I'm not trying to copy anybody. It's just that's what everybody's using right now, or had used for showing what Windows XP gaming computers can do. I plan on doing a lot more games with this in the future, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, this is a follow-up video to the build video that I did with this machine, which was a, quote, dream PC I had during high school. Prior to that, elementary school, middle school, I was always on consoles. I was playing Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, N64, PS1, GameCube. In fact, I was always almost one generation behind on consoles. We got the PS1 in, I actually still have the original PlayStation. It's hooked up over there for now. It's marked March of '99, so if I remember correctly, I think we got that Christmas of '99, which was just a year or two before the PS2 was coming out. In fact, this is one of the last models of the original gray brick PS1s, if you know kind of much about PS1's history. I was still playing Super Nintendo up to that point. And, with the GameCube came out, I went for GameCube instead of the PS2 or Xbox, which I'm glad I did because GameCube games right now are stupidly high. But, I didn't get a replacement generation console up until the 360, which we got that when I was living in when I moved to an apartment, and the Xbox One was a year from being launched, or I think leaked. But anyway, yeah, I was on console, and I wanted to play some of the PC games that were coming out because I had seen some videos online, whether it was IGN or some other companies' websites, showing just how much, better PC games looked versus their console contemporaries. Even the original Xbox, which was essentially a low-spec gaming computer according to its hardware, it's still, PC games at the time, late 2000s, looked great. And I wanted a PC that I could use for games at that time. So the parts I picked were nothing, awe-inspiring. It was a MSI P31 Neo board, non-SLI, because one, I couldn't have afforded 2 graphics cards, which, looking back now, I couldn't even afford 1 graphics card back then. And mainly because I think that was the one I was talking about back then, because I had a notebook that I wrote down stuff, and I kind of wish I could find it again because I think I might have tossed it on accident. But my handwriting was atrocious. It still is, if you ask my friends and family. But that's not it. I wrote down MSI Red, and then there were scribbles. So I think it was the P31 Neo. I just kind of went onto eBay and I typed in P30 or MSI LJ775, and there was a lot of red boards. There was a lot of boards out there, but one that really caught my eye was the one I used, the P31 Neo, which ironically I didn't even have to spend that much on because it actually came out of a part slot I picked up from somebody throwing away a bunch of parts from a local business here in my hometown. I tossed in a Core 2 Quad Q6600, which is the most iconic XP era CPU in a lot of people's opinions. Yes, the board did support a lot more powerful Core 2 Quads and a lot more powerful Core 2 Duos, especially the later end ones. And it even supports, if the revision's correct, Core 2 Extremes, which would be awesome to use, but I was kind of wanting to build this with the parts I wanted back then, not I thought were cool. Because if that was the case, I would have been using like an SLI board and dual GPUs and the Core 2 Extremes and all that goody stuff. For the video card, I went with an 8800 GT 320 megabyte model, which began a bunch of my headaches. A 400 watt Cooler Master power supply, which also caused a bunch of problems. And 4 gigabyte of DDR2 800 megahertz RAM, which ended up being two sticks of Silverline Muskin RAM, which I've never really heard of prior to me building this, but apparently it's a very decent, at the time anyway. In fact, I still think they're around. They're still around because that was what I put in my Windows 10 gaming PC, which was one of my previous videos. I used Munchkin Redline Ridgebacks, but yeah, I never heard of the brand before, but it holds up really well. I use two 2 GB sticks, which is overkill for Windows 32-bit because it's considering it can only use I think it's reporting that it's 3.35 gigabyte of RAM, which is still more than enough for Windows XP. In fact, I could actually ran this with 1 gig of RAM, but I want to make sure I had enough RAM for everything. And the final piece was the Sound Blaster Auto G2 ZS, which is one of the greater cards for the Windows XP era. I do have an XFI card that I would love to have popped in, but I think there's an issue with it because it was, like I mentioned that in the previous video, it was my Windows 10 PC, but then it quit working. I don't know if it was a driver breaking or Windows 10 breaking the driver. I don't know. I'll test it one of these days. And the case is a Antec designed case, and it kind of has that Antec-esque feel to it. The only thing that's annoying about this case is the only way to get inside the internals is I have to take the top off first, and the side panel slides up instead of back. But then again, I never really intended to be taking this thing apart all the time to swap parts. In hindsight, I probably should have used a different case because I've torn this thing apart more times than I can count now trying to get it to work right. Now, that being said, let's talk about some of the changes I made to this thing to make it better and at least make it frickin' reliable. So the first change I did was I tried popping the power supply out and I dropped in a 650 watt in-win. The reason was because as I was trying to install Windows into this, it installed Windows just fine. But as soon as I ran any benchmarks, it would lock up. Which was weird because in my head, for some reason, I thought the older hardware should use lower power supplies, but it didn't. In fact, it actually blue screened to me enough times. And then all of a sudden, the video card quit working completely. So I thought, well, that's my problem. It's locking up because the 8800 GT, an iconic GPU, failed. It happens. It's XP era hardware. This stuff's now over 10 years old, and so it's not surprising that things are starting to fail. So I popped in a GTS 250, which was really pushing the era of where I wanted this thing to be. In fact, that'd be closer to like a Windows 7 era PC build. But even then, I was getting weird lockups. I tried different CPU. I tried different RAM. I tried receiving, every RAM stick I had that was DDR2, slower RAM, faster RAM, one stick. I filled all 4 slots, just, trying to find something that was correlated with it locking up when I tried to run a benchmark. It would just hard lock. Couldn't figure out why until I decided to try the aforementioned higher watt power supply, and it started running great. Which didn't make sense to me. I thought, well, it's a Cooler Master. That's kind of a higher, a known brand. It should work just fine until I decided to go online and do a little bit of math. I was starving it for power. In fact, the minimum power requirements for all the hardware I had was right at about 485, 490 watt, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I've done this. So I popped in the 650 watt in-win one, and it ran just fine. It would ran benchmarks. I ran stress tests on it. I even overclocked a little bit on the CPU to see if I could get it to hold stable, and it did. The problem was that 650 watt in-win was meant for a test bench that it was planned. I built it. I haven't really used it yet because it's for mainly testing PCI cards. I'm still having some faults with it. I think it's actually the motherboard on that one. But yeah, since I replaced it, it ran just fine. So I pulled that power supply out and I dropped in a 550 watt one that I picked up. It was in a parts tower I picked up. And side tangent with this, really odd specs. When I built the PC, I showed the Asus board that I was going to use, LJ775, but I used DDR3 RAM. That came out of the computer that had that 550 watt one in it. I just didn't look at the specs for the power supply. I just kind of left it in the case. So I didn't really look at it. I just tore the motherboard and stuff out for parts. The specs were weird. It had like a GT, 430 with a Core 2 Duo, like an early Core 2 Duo. In fact, I actually don't think it was Core 2 Duo now that I'm thinking about it. I think it was actually a Pentium 4 of the that would work with it. And like 6 gigabyte of RAM across different sticks at different speeds. It was a really weird configuration. But anyway, after all that, this thing ran just fine. Except I didn't like the video card that was in it. So I ended up finding a video card that I actually wanted back in the day, an 8800 GT. This one's a 640 megabyte variant, and more specifically, it's an 8800 GTS and X, which it's actually made by MSI, and it's actually overclocked just a little bit, enough to where it's just about to hit the specs of a GTX 8800. So I was really happy about that. One of the other changes I made to this machine is I've also, not really doesn't affect performance, it just affects quality of life here, down in this basement, is it's a lot quieter. I don't know if you can notice or not because my microphone sucks, but it's actually a lot quieter than it used to be because I pulled that junk Thermaltake cooler off because it kept getting noisy. The bearings were going out of it and it kept getting noisier and noisier as it went. To the point where even my wife found it annoying because she could hear it. Luckily, I'm on several Facebook groups with retro parts and stuff, and I actually contacted a guy who always comes across parts lots, and I just asked him, I said, hey, do you have an LGA 775 cooler that'll work with the Core 2 Quad? He got back to me, and for the cost of shipping, it was a factory OEM Intel downforce cooler for a Core 2 Quad. In fact, I think the Core 2 Quad, Core 2 Duo, in fact, I think the part number, when I looked it up, it was for like the 8000, 9000 series Core 2 Quads and Duos of the Intel generation, so it runs fine. In fact, I've actually overclocked the CPU a little bit from 2.44 to I think it's running 2.66 now, and it's keeping it cool just fine. In fact, this whole case is keeping it just cool. In fact, it's keeping it so cool, so quiet, I can actually barely hear it right now. And I did do a lot more cable management on it. It looks a lot better and a lot prettier. There's one change I'm going to make, though, in the near future, is going to be swapping out this 120, I think it's a 120 millimeter fan, because it's a speed selectable one with a little toggle switch. It's actually powered by Molex. I want to replace that with a fan that's actually motherboard controlled, just for my own. It makes me feel better to do it. Another change I made was I got rid of that 16:9 Dell monitor. There's nothing wrong with it. It ran just fine. It worked fine with my games. But in the XP era, it would have been more appropriate to use like a CRT or a 4x3 LCD, which I do have. But I wanted to do one thing that was kind of sort of higher end for that time, and that was this monitor. This is a HP 16:10 monitor. More specifically, the model number is HP W2207, which I think came out about 2010. So it's at the line of where I wanted this build to be. But it looks just fine. I like the high gloss look. It's got this nice sleek look, which kind of gives it that era of XP, which was black and gray and silver. And all my games run great on it, so I'm not going to complain. I also swapped out those old beige speakers for a set of Cambridge Soundworks speakers that I picked up at some point. Yeah, I don't fully remember where I got a lot of these parts. A lot of them were just in like part slots or boxes, or I went to a business, hey, you have any old computers? And they would just throw me a tote of, yeah, these have been sitting in the closet, back room, collecting dust for years. Take it. So, I don't know where the speakers came from, but they sound great, especially with this Audigy. I've thought about getting like a couple more speakers for some surround sound for it, but for right now, it runs fine. So, let's check out some games. You guys can put it back together first. Get you some games and see how it works. And of course, the first game we gotta try is Unreal Tournament. Of course, one thing I hate about this monitor is the massive glare. So you can see everything behind me, including my mess, but that's fine. What I love is that when you go to the settings and set everything on high, I've never seen this happen, or I should say heard, But I've heard it could do this, so... No, hi. More games need to do that. And as you can see, I have awesome frame rates with this. Getting over, well over 400, oops. Ah, I could see. Ah. So yeah, no surprise. Unreal Tournament 2004 is running perfectly, over 400 frames per second. Am I really gonna die from this? Yeah, right. And now we have Fear, and I decided to test the built-in benchmarking thing, cinematic, and it is running awesomely just fine. I'll admit, I've only ever played this on console, and this looks way better already than anything I've played on console. There's a few dips, but I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, look at that water effect. This was gorgeous, and it still holds up today, in my opinion. Fire effects look really good. Physics. Yeah, look at that. That is... I'm happy. And it's not a Windows XP machine without testing, of course, Oblivion. So I actually, I actually played more Skyrim than I have Oblivion. I need to get back to playing this, but yeah, everything on the high setting. It's getting me well over 60 FPS. This is awesome. And yeah, usually I play this on console, so this actually looks really good. There's some dips here and there, but nothing too unusual. Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Good running. Oh yeah. And it looks really good. I'm sure if I tweak some settings I would get a lot higher, but this is actually running really good. And of course, I have to play one of my favorite games of all time, Fallout 3. Okay, so actually I prefer New Vegas over 3, but it's very slight. and it's actually running really well. I mean, even with a lot going on, I'm getting over 60 FPS. This is awesome. And of course, I have to try the PC Melter itself, a Crysis. Oh my god, this reflection. So yeah, to graphics, we have everything set. So everything is set to high spec, and we're going to see what it can do. Okay. And I'm not getting good frame rate at all. Okay, so I'm not getting the best frame rate, but I'm getting pretty good. I'm not going to complain too much. So there we go. It runs these games just fine. Yeah, like I said, not the most huge variety of games. It's basically the games that everybody who uses an XP computer, showcases games for. With the Oblivion one, I have a really, I had a save file on it. I think it didn't save or whatever because I was further along than that. That was just the last save point I could load. So I think I either forgot to save or it just didn't autosave, like I had autosave off or something. I don't know. Did get further than that. But anyway. Yeah, Crysis is Crysis. It's not going to run great on this machine either. That's just Crysis. I do plan on running a bunch more XP games on it at some point in the future, so look out for that. And I do want to answer a couple questions I got in the comments about this machine. Mainly regarding some of the parts I used. Somebody in the comments had mentioned that I could run this in dual channel if I ran it in the opposing slots, which I do have it set to that right now. I don't remember if I ran dual channel when I first built it, but between when I first built it and now when I was doing all the testing on RAM sticks and all that kind of stuff, I was testing every configuration. I even was able to find the documentation on MSI's website. They still have it, oddly. And if the documentation's right, it doesn't, it's weird, it says it basically doesn't matter. Dual channel's enabled when there's two identical sticks in two slots. From what I know about modern computers, it should be alternating slots, or it should be the alternator slots furthest away from the CPU. But then again, this was over 10 years ago. Things have changed, so maybe dual channel is just naturally enabled when there's two identical sticks in two slots. I don't know. It's working fine just now, and I really haven't noticed a performance difference between benchmarks when I run in any of the slots. So, I don't know. That's my answer to it. I was also told that I could probably get better overclocking if I was to use a different cooler, and that's absolutely true. I did consider getting a more modern tower cooler to keep this cool. But then my next plan was if I do any upgrades to this, like get a Core 2 Quad Extreme, or Core 2 Extreme, then yes, I would absolutely get a way better cooler so I could overclock it, and to keep that much more powerful chip cool. But I don't know if I'm going to do too many upgrades to this, mainly because I've come across a few parts lately that I could use to build a much more powerful Windows XP machine. Not to replace this, but mainly to just be a more powerful machine. But yeah, if I was to overclock it more than what I am right now, in fact, I think the highest I could go with this is like 2.7, 2.8 before I start having problems with like any voltages at the board. So as for overclocking, I think 2.66 is where it's at. That's where it's going to stay. And I have heard that there's a mod to do the CPU itself by covering one of the pins to get up to 3 gigahertz. I don't know if this board would support that. It does have its own built-in overclocking feature on the board. And if I remember correctly, I think it can go up to like 15% of its base clock, so 15% of where my current overclock is. At least that's how I'm reading it. And when I said I was having some issues with some games, I did get a comment that said that Fallout 3 actually has problems with anything above a dual-core processor. It's like a weird bug, or I'm sorry, it's a Bethesda game. It's a feature. That apparently has problems with anything above dual-core, which makes sense because when the game came out, quad-core was the enthusiast level, dual and single-core was the entry and budget level. Apparently there's a patch out there, and I did actually download it. I haven't installed it because Fallout 4 or 3 is running just fine on all 4 cores. I do have a later version or later print of Fallout 3, so maybe that's why. I don't know. If that's the reason, then great. If not, then I'll install the patch and not have to worry about it. So yeah, thanks for coming along with me on my follow-up to the Windows XP machine here. I know I didn't show too much gameplay footage again because I just wanted to get some gameplay footage out there. I plan on doing a retrospective of all these games that I have on here and that I haven't put on here yet because I love playing Fallout 3. Fear was a lot of fun. Crysis, I think the last time I played Crysis was on was it Xbox 360, I think? Yeah, Xbox 360. I had to think if I even had it for that console, and it's right there. And again, I apologize for the mess. This room's being reshuffled around right now. In fact, there's a huge mess behind the camera that I am not going to show because all my games are about to be pulled off my shelves because I need to rebuild my shelves and move my shelves and move my TVs and whatever. So yeah, that being said, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel to see more content, hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload more content. If there's any game you want to see me play on this, or any XP era software where you want to see me run on this, I'll try and track it down, see if I can get it to work and play it. With that being said, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.